The Baltimore Ravens 2024 schedule officially dropped. We instantly break it down, talk about games to watch. There was schedule prediction in there and a lot more coming up next year on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for being here this evening, tonight, and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day or of the night. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. It includes over in video form on YouTube, where we are live right now. You can like the video, subscribe to the channel, also turn notifications on so you don't miss out on any of our live content. But if you're not listening live or watching live, you can obviously catch it playback after the fact in video form and audio form as well. If you're an audio listener, thank you as well. You can subscribe over there, follow along, tune in. Same show, both audio form and video form here, so you don't have to worry about missing out on any other content for us. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We got the full official Baltimore Ravens 2024 schedule. And it's exciting. You know, the NFL, I give the NFL a lot of credit. They have turned this into essentially an extravaganza when it comes to what this night actually is. I mean, not a lot of people, even just dating back a few years, right? Not a lot of people really took the schedule release as, oh, it's this huge, big thing, and everybody has to tune in, everybody has to watch. That was never really what it was. So to me, I think the NFL, I mean, look, to their credit, they've made it a whole event. They've got the TV, all those teams release really funny videos. So the Ravens did their thing. They had Stavvy do his thing, and it was a really funny video, actually. So I'm not going to play it on here, but if you haven't seen what the Ravens did, be sure to check that out. But we're going to be talking about, just again, we're going to go through the schedule game by game here. We're going to talk about games to watch, what to watch for, we'll throw an early prediction in there. We're going to get more into schedule predictions in tomorrow's 6 a.m. episode, though, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But I think there was some stuff I expected, other stuff I wasn't expecting. And as I talked about, there are some games within the games of these schedule releases and what the schedule actually looks like. So let's start off here with Baltimore's regular season. Well, if you want to talk about preseason, they're playing the Eagles, the Falcons, and the Packers, so maybe there'll be some joint practices. We talked about that with Kadri Ismail yesterday, so that's something to me where it's really important. Baltimore, though, they have had some history of joint practices. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up going that route, and I think that honestly is probably the right decision for them. But it's the preseason. We're here for the regular season. You got the Chiefs in week 1. We knew that. We've talked about it for a while. Thursday night football. That, to me, is a good thing for Baltimore. I've been pretty vocal about that, especially because it means there is not a short week in week 1, and that's really big. Now, there are other short weeks that the Ravens schedule has that are unfortunate, but we'll talk about that. So week 1's Kansas City. Week 2, you got the Raiders. That's at home. Week 3, you got the Cowboys away. 4:25 game there. Week 4, second primetime game of the year already for the Ravens. 8:20 Sunday Night Football against the Bills at home. Week 5, you get the Bengals away. Week 6 is the Commanders at home. Week 7, you got another primetime game, Monday Night Football against the Buccaneers. That's away. Then week number 8, you get the Browns away. Week 9, you get the Broncos at home. Week 10, you get the Bengals at home. That's Thursday Night Football. Week 11, you get the Chargers week 12. 11 is the Pittsburgh Steelers away. Week 12, that Chargers game, that is going to be Monday Night Football, another primetime game that's away. Week 13, you get the Eagles 4:25. That's at home. Week 14 is the bye week. Week 15, you get the New York Giants away. Week 16, that's Saturday afternoon football against the Steelers, 4:30. Week 17, Wednesday football, Christmas for the Ravens. That's against the Texans away. And then week 18, we don't know the time or the date of this yet, but that's against the Browns. So I see Carl in the chat saying a later bye week is better than an early bye, in my opinion. I 100% agree with you, Carl, especially because of the fact that if you have that early bye, week 4, week 5, whatever you want to talk about there, it's a lot of football that's played after that, right? You have so much you have to go with in terms of you're playing from week 5 on or week 6 on. That's a lot for a team. And I don't know the numbers behind this. I'd actually be pretty curious. But to me, if Baltimore had an early bye, I would not have been happy. I agree with Carl 100%. My sweet spot for a bye is more in the like week 9 to 11 range, week 8 to 10 range, just because the Ravens week 14 bye, there's a lot of football played before that. So they don't really have rest until they have the bye in week 14. So to me, if you have week 9, week 10, week 11, middle of the season, that to me is the ideal sweet spot. But I would much rather have a late bye week than an early bye week. So, not the end of the world. I think it still falls in a pretty decent spot for Baltimore, gives them some late season rest before the rest of that schedule. But just some early things that I noticed on the schedule. First of all, it's a very evenly based schedule. I'm just going to read it out quickly here. You got away, home, away, home, away, home, away, away, home, home, away, away, home, away, home, away, home. That is literally an even schedule across the board. The Ravens are playing one more road game this year because of the new NFL schedule rules that came out a couple of years ago. That is quite literally the most even this schedule could have gotten for the Ravens. And it depends on kind of, I guess, where you have your opinions, depending on if you would like to have the Ravens be at home for 4 straight games, then go on the road for 4 or 3 straight games, then come back, all that craziness. I personally like the fact that it's pretty straightforward, right? You don't have to go on the road for a month. You don't, the homestand would be nice, but with that long homestand, there are going to be those road games sandwiched in, and I think more so. So I like the fact that it's even there. I mean, literally, it's 1 away, 1 home, 1 away, 1 home. Then you got 2 away, 2 home, 2 away, 2 home. So I like that fact. And David saying if we make it through September, at least 3-1, we should be in good shape. September is a tough month for us. And I realized that I haven't been pulling up people's comments when I'm doing this on the YouTube. So I apologize. I'm going to start trying to do that more. So it's a feature we can do, and I'm going to use the feature. So David, I agree. September is the first part that I noticed. Honestly, the first 5 games here for Baltimore, if you want to throw October into this as well, just that first week. Chiefs, Raiders, Cowboys, Bills, Bengals. To have 4 of your first 5 games be against the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Bills, and the Bengals, that's no easy task, right? And especially 3 of those 4 games are away. You play the Chiefs away, the Cowboys away, and the Bengals away. 3-1 would be ideal in those first, well, I guess if you want to throw the Raiders in here. I mean, yeah, if you lose to one of these tough teams, I would hope you beat the Raiders if you're Baltimore. But even if you're talking about the first 5 games, 4-1 would be incredible, right? I think 3-2 is probably more so realistic. But again, Baltimore's a good team, right? But I don't think Baltimore's going to go out there and just start dropping games to good teams because you know what? They're a good team too. You see all these good teams. Baltimore's playing, 10 playoff teams from last year? I think that Baltimore's going to have a challenging time with these games, right? I'm not sure we're going to see as many big blowouts as we saw last season. But that's fine because you know what? If they win the game by 1 or they win the game by 30, it doesn't matter. A win is a win, right? We'll have conversations about how those wins look. But early in the season, the Ravens are going to be trying to figure out their offensive line a little bit, figure out Derrick Henry a little bit, and how they want to utilize him and some other stuff too. Zach Orr getting acclimated as a first-time play caller, defensive coordinator. So that first stretch, it's not going to be, hey, let's just ease our way in and try to figure stuff out. It is full throttle ahead. You're full steam ahead when you're talking about what Baltimore has on the early part of their schedule. And then you look at the last part. Remember last year we talked about that schedule and how crazy it was, particularly after their bye week. After their bye week, it's only going to be 4 games after week 14. You got the Giants, the Steelers, the Texans, and the Browns. So 2 divisional matchups, a really good Texans team, and then the Giants, that's a game you probably should win. But we know this Ravens team. We'll talk about this a tiny bit more in the final part of the show. But we know this Ravens team likes to lose games they're supposed to win and win games they're supposed to lose, right? It's the MO of the team where honestly, I feel like some people think that it's better that they play these good teams because they tend to play down to competition sometimes. And that's every team. It's not just Baltimore. I'm not just ragging on Baltimore for that, but it's something we saw last year. It's something we've seen plenty of times in the past. So the fact that Baltimore has all these playoff teams on their schedule, some people are probably like, oh yeah, I love that because the Ravens, that they play up to competition and they play down to competition. And if you're playing more playoff teams, obviously you're going to be playing more so up to that competition. Now, in the middle of the season also is where I'm intrigued. Baltimore from week 8 to week 12, reading out these games, Browns, Broncos, Bengals, Steelers, Chargers. If you want to take the Broncos out of there, fine. Again, it's a game you should win, but you're not going to discount them, right? Browns, Bengals, Steelers, Chargers. If we're taking out the Broncos, that's 3 divisional matchups and 1 really good Chargers team that's supposed to be an AFC competitor. There are 3 subsections of this schedule for me that are runs. Week 1 to week 5, that's a run for me for the Ravens. Week 8 to week 12, that's another run. Then after the bye week, week 15 to week 18, if you even want to put week 15 out of there and say week 16 to week 18, that is the final run of the year for the Ravens. Beginning run, middle run, end run. Very straightforward for the Ravens on their schedule. The games in the middle there, Commanders, Buccaneers, etc. I'm not necessarily uber worried about those games, but again, can't discount those teams. You got to earn those wins, right? Just because Baltimore will be favored, and I'm not sure how many, but if Baltimore's favored against teams like Denver, New York, etc., doesn't mean they're going to win the game, right? You got to go out there and earn the wins. But I think overall, a very healthy schedule for the Ravens. I'm going to be talking about some of the pros and cons of it in the second part of the show, plus some games to watch, because there are some really intriguing things there as well, plus getting into more of the prime time action for the Ravens. So stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on this instant reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. And I've had plenty of frustrating ticket buying experiences in my life, especially for NFL games. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Sometimes I'm going for last minute deals, and sometimes there are just no good deals at all. With Curtis last minute deals, all in prices of using your seat and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. And so now we know the official Ravens schedule is out there. Plenty of high-profile games on that schedule. We've talked about them, and we're going to continue to talk about them. That Chiefs game would be awesome to go to. Obviously, the primetime games at home. Buffalo is a game at home at M&T Bank Stadium I would love to go to personally. So the Gametime app obviously is your place for NFL games and finding tickets for those NFL games. Plus, the Gametime app has so many amazing features like last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, the app, the features on there are great, and the experience is great, too. They have flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Send us by again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKED1NFL for $20 off. Down the Gametime app today, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here live with you on this Wednesday night. Appreciate everybody for tuning in here today, making us your first listen of the night. Free and available, of course, all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube and in audio form as well. So let's talk about some of these games to watch and things to break down. I think one of the big things that people are talking about right now is the fact that Baltimore is playing on the road on Christmas for the second consecutive year. And look, first of all, it's not fair to the players, not fair to the coaches, the staff, whoever goes out there. It's tough, right? The allure of Christmas Day, the primetime games, the NFL making their money, like that's what it is here. You have 31 other teams you could have put on Christmas, right? The Ravens, they played last year. They beat up on San Francisco last year. It'd be one thing if Baltimore's at home for this game. But the fact that they're going on the road again for Christmas, I mean, if it goes in the Ravens' favor, then fine, right? Like, great, they win the game. But there is another human element to this, which I'm sure a lot of the players and coaches are not happy about as well. So I don't know. Baltimore has a lot to figure out in terms of how they're going to maneuver and manage these primetime games. It's against a lot of good teams too. I mean, sometimes, you had like the stinker Thursday night games you didn't want to watch. Baltimore obviously is a team where Lamar Jackson, the NFL wants Lamar Jackson in primetime, right? Lamar Jackson is must-see TV. So I'm not saying that, the NFL made a mistake by putting Baltimore on Christmas. If you're talking about logistically, it makes sense in terms of who Baltimore is. But again, you could have put a bunch of other teams there. You could have had Ravens-Texans as a primetime game, right? Another week earlier in the season. You didn't have to put Baltimore on Christmas. So I feel for them. I feel for the players, feel for the coaches, feel for everybody who is going to have to deal with that. And look, I mean, primetime games are interesting, especially, for me covering the team and everybody else who covers this team too, right? You got to work your schedule around it. And so, it's interesting to see how, all right, yeah, 1 p.m. we talk about like, oh, everybody has the routine, right? They wake up and, get ready for the game. It's 1 p.m. and you get that whole thing going. The Ravens have more than half of their games this year in the 4:25 window or the 8 whatever window, 8:15, 8:20, 8:30. The Ravens played less than half of their games in the 1 p.m. slot this year, which is crazy, right? I mean, the Ravens are a 1 p.m. team. They're an East Coast team. No crazy breaking news there. But the Ravens have those 5 primetime games. Then they have 4 4:25 or 4:30 games. They play Dallas at 4:25. They play the Eagles at 4:25. They play the Steelers at 4:30, and they play the Texans at 4:30. And that's not to mention, again, those 5 primetime games. So 9 out of their 17 games this year are going to be at 4:25, 4:30, or 8:15, 8:20, 8:30, which is it's interesting. I mean, this is who Baltimore is. They're the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, dominant regular season. We know there's a storyline with the Chiefs. We know there's a storyline with their division rivals, the Texans with the divisional round win that the Ravens had. So it's not shocking that the Ravens are getting this treatment from the NFL. The Ravens, they like the spotlight, but they also like being underdogs. And they've been in the spotlight really ever since Lamar's second season, when everybody was like, is Lamar the real deal? What's he going to be? What's he going to look like? And so Lamar Jackson's must-see TV. Lamar Jackson is primetime TV. In the NFL, I predicted Baltimore would get 5 primetime games. They most certainly did that. And that, in my opinion, is the right decision the NFL should have made. But I don't know. I just feel for everybody there on Christmas. Now, games to watch. The Christmas game is one of them. Chiefs game is another. Obviously, you look at all the primetime games as well. The Buccaneers game is interesting to me. That Week 7 game on Monday Night Football. Tampa's a team that I feel like doesn't get a ton of respect, especially because Baker Mayfield is their quarterback. And I feel like people kind of put Baker, or they have put Baker in a box and have left him there. And it's not necessarily like, oh, well, he's Baker and he's only this like middle of the pack quarterback. Baker was really good for Tampa last year. Definitely found a home there. Now, again, Baltimore should probably win that game, but I'm intrigued because I think out of all of the like middle of the pack, maybe a little better than middle of the pack teams, Tampa is the team that I think most intrigues me. The Commanders with Jaden Daniels is going to be an interesting game. I know a lot of people maybe wanted that one in prime time, but that one gets the 1 p.m. treatment. In terms of NFC, you get Week 3 NFC, Week 6 NFC, Week 13 NFC, Week 15 NFC, and then Tampa's Week 7 there. So it's pretty spread out. Lamar Jackson, again, 20-1 against the NFC in his career. The one loss coming to that team he's playing in Week 15, the Daniel Jones-led New York Giants. So crazy. That's still probably one of my favorite stats out there, is that the one Lamar Jackson NFC loss is to the Giants. Especially Daniel Jones. Like, out of all these teams, losing to the juggernaut that was San Francisco last year, all these other dominant NFC teams that Baltimore's had to face, it was Daniel Jones and the Giants. Lamar lost that game. Well, it wasn't just Lamar, but he had that crazy over the middle of the field, like the entire length of it, the Ricard interception. But to me, that one is really interesting as well. And then to me, I think another game that I'm looking forward to personally is that Dallas game. Dallas is a team where they're going to have so many eyes on them this year, especially after what happened against Green Bay. The Dak Prescott storyline is huge. But there are some really good pass rushers coming to town, pass rushers coming to town, or just Baltimore going to face them. They're going to have to face some really vaunted pass rushers early, some really decent wide receiver cores early as well. I mean, that CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, obviously what I'm talking about there. But obviously the Chiefs, that's going to be a big game. The Raiders have Max Crosby, Devontae Adams. The Bills, again, that's the one that's interesting because Stephon Diggs isn't there anymore, and their defense also lost a lot. But then Cincinnati, we're going to see what the whole T. Higgins situation is, Trey Hendrickson as well. And in terms of divisional games, the Ravens' divisional schedule, Week 5, Week 8, Week 10, Week 11, Week 16, and then Week 18. There we go. Boom. I'm trying to read off this really tiny schedule here, and I'm having a little trouble, but it's okay. The show goes on. So that is interesting because, again, if we remember, the Ravens ended up having all of their AFC divisional road games done by the time Week 5 rolled around. That was it. They had played 3 of their first 5 games on the road against their AFC divisional opponents, and they won 2 out of 3 of those games. But you're now going to have a situation where the last AFC North road game for you this year for the Ravens is going to be Week 11. So a little bit different there. But you're still going to have a really important stretch down the stretch of that Steelers and Browns. That could be interesting because depending on how the AFC North shapes up, the Ravens could be fighting for playoff position there, AFC seeding, maybe for the division crown. Divisional record, AFC record is big. And here's another point here. The Ravens play 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, it's 4 of their first 5 games against AFC opponents. It actually wasn't. The Ravens have a lot of NFC games. And so if you haven't heard my philosophy on NFC games, they're the best type of loss you can take. If you're going to lose a game to an NFC team. Doesn't impact divisional record, doesn't impact conference record, and those are the things that really make an impact when you're talking about playoff seeding later down the line. So a loss to the Raiders in week 2, people are saying, oh, it's okay, you can bounce back, but that loss could have major implications seeding-wise or whatnot when you're talking about how the playoff picture could look, and you look back to week 18, week 17, and that's what it could look like. So you got to win those games that you should win, obviously, against those big primetime teams and big juggernaut teams as well. Got to win those too. But we're going to be talking a lot more about what to watch for in the final part of the show, so be sure to stay tuned for that. We got plenty to talk about here. We'll get a nice little schedule prediction in there as well, which we'll also be talking about on our 6 a.m. episode. But stay tuned. We got a lot to get to on the final segment of this Locked On Ravens live edition. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's going to take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big one of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So for me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. The Nuggets won Game 5 last night. It was crazy. Nikola Jokic just goes off. If you bet Nikola Jokic on FanDuel overs, you probably made some money over there. Hopefully, they're able to win Game 6 tomorrow. I'm hoping they do. I don't know. They might lose that one, though. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens here live on Wednesday night. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. Again, really appreciate everybody for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. Be sure to subscribe, video form, audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. And I see Alex checking in, finally made it to a live. Appreciate you checking in. Glad you could make it in. The lives are impromptu sometimes, and sometimes I don't know when I'm going to go live, but I'm excited we were able to make it in. Alex says we're going 13-4 at least. So let's get into what we're going to watch for here for Baltimore, and then we'll throw some schedule predictions up there as well. And also just want to acknowledge Carl here. Woo, saying I'm excited for second season with Lamar and Monken. And that's big too, because what this actually goes great into what I was going to talk about. So with the first 5 weeks of the season, as I talked about earlier, it's not going to be easing into anything, right? You got to go full steam ahead. That's what it is. But the fact that this is the second season of Todd Monken and him with pretty much that whole group on offense outside of particularly the offensive line and Derrick Henry, that does give me some confidence. Where we saw some inconsistencies early from Todd Monken last season, and that's really just him trying to get to understand his personnel trying to get to understand him, and that was some of the natural progression of the offense. It's something I'd warned about for the majority of the offseason once Todd Monken was hired. I said it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows every single week all the time. They're going to have to figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be, again, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows again this year. Still, with a new offensive line, with Derrick Henry coming in, you're going to have to figure out how you want to use those guys, who works well, what strengths and weaknesses are. But it makes me feel a little better that it's not year 1 of Todd Monken's offense. It's year 2 of Todd Monken's offense. Now, on the same token, as we talked about earlier too, this is year 1 of Zach Orr. Year 1 of Zach Orr doing any sort of play calling, doing any sort of coaching here at a defensive coordinator role. Now, obviously, Orr has the playing experience. It's not like he's coming in just completely dry here. But it is, again, you go against the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Bengals, and 4 of your first 5 games there, it's the Chiefs, Cowboys, Bills, Bengals. That's a big stepping stone for Zach Orr there. Hopefully he's able to get up there and do a great thing. But for him, it's, he's going to have to figure out how he gets a feel for the game as a coach, calls the game as a coach, and you're not going to have any leeway to go out there and maybe say, I'm going to take this game to kind of just experiment with stuff. There's not going to be a time for that. It's going to be, we're throwing our best out there all the time. And you're not going to show every single thing, right? Playbooks develop over the course of the season. Coaches, players will develop over the course of the season too. But this isn't, if you start the season 2-3 or 1-4, that's like absolute disaster. That's like horrendous. And the way the Ravens have the schedule lined up here, you can't go easy against the Chiefs. And even like a team like the Raiders, where you say, oh, this, just that's an easy win. That's the Raiders. As we talked about, the Ravens have played up to competition, but they also have played down to competition. So you cannot get in that mindset if you're Baltimore of, we're going to take this week off so we can get back to it against Dallas in week 3. Not going to happen. Also, for me, what to watch out for, I think the divisional games are huge. We talked about those. Primetime games are huge. We talked about those. But also how Baltimore maneuvers and manages through their bye week is going to be big. And obviously, it's going to depend on injuries. It's going to depend on how Baltimore's season has looked, what their record is. But to me, Baltimore has a lot to lose in these first 4 or 5 weeks, and that could dictate the rest of their season. Now, they also have a lot to gain on the flip side of it, where if you start the year 4-1 or 5-0, you get a really good record coming out of those first 5, it sets a tone for you early. And I think Baltimore has a great shot to do it. It's just a matter of them staying locked in. And that's absolutely what it is for them, because at the end of the day, momentum is a big thing. Momentum is honestly probably underrated, especially when it comes to wins and losses, where the mental aspect of sports and everything that comes with momentum, essentially, it can get swept under the rug a little bit, where week 1 is uberly important to me, at least. It's so crazily important because of the fact that, yes, one loss to the Chiefs or one win against the Chiefs in week 1 is not going to determine the Ravens season. Your season does not end in week 1 if you lose to the Chiefs. It also does not mean you win the Super Bowl if you win against the Chiefs in week 1. But that does give you some level of momentum, and that to me is huge. I see Carl asking, will Harbaugh play the starters more for the start of the season so we don't start rusty because we don't have a bye week till week 14? We have a problem being rusty when the season starts. So this was asked. I can't remember who asked it. I apologize. I can't remember who asked it. But the question asked in my last live stream was, will the Ravens playing the Chiefs in week 1 end up impacting the Ravens preseason? And I actually talked about this with Kaji Ismail on yesterday's show, or I guess it was today's show at 6 a.m. So for today's 6 a.m. show, I asked Kaji Ismail about it, and he said that if the Ravens have joint practices, he would probably lean on the side of no, they're not going to alter their preseason routine in terms of who they play and who they don't, because joint practices do give you some sense. It's not exactly game formation or game feel, but joint practices is against another team. It's more intense. It's essentially game intensity, not just in the stadium. You're playing against another team. So he said if it's joint practices, he's not going to feel like the Ravens alter. If there aren't joint practices, he feels like Baltimore could give Lamar and the starters and the defensive starters an extra series, quarter, whatever that may be. So that's going to be interesting as well. And I see Joe checking in saying he's here. What's up, Joe? See, I'm pulling up comments now. See, if you're not familiar, I'm also a part of the Ryan Ripken show, and I completely forgot that, hey, look, I can pull up comments here just like we do on the Ryan Ripken show. So I'm pulling them up now, and I'm excited for the Ravens season. And Joe's saying he hasn't looked yet. What's the Week 16 game going into Christmas? It's Pittsburgh on Saturday. So that's another thing. And I think someone talked about this. It was either I streamed on Bleacher Report before going live here, but someone had asked about that and talked about it, where you have 2 short weeks in a row, essentially, because Week 15 is a Sunday game. Then you have Week 16, which is a Saturday game. So Sunday to Saturday, that's a short week. Then you have Saturday to Wednesday. That's another short week. So 2 consecutive short weeks for the Ravens. Now, Saturday to Sunday obviously is not as quote-unquote big of a deal as Saturday to Wednesday. And I guess, it's better than the Ravens playing on the Sunday, and then that's one extra day for them to get ready for the Wednesday game on Christmas. But literally, I don't know. That's tough, because we had talked so much about, one of the big advantages of the Chiefs game is the fact that it's not a short week, because Thursday night games are short weeks. But now the Ravens have a Thursday night game against Cincinnati, so that's a short week. And then you have 2 other short weeks, but it's 2 big short weeks and 1 little short week too. And I see Joe saying he just said that to his dad. He called it. Joe, you're on the wavelength, man. You know what's going on. So I don't know. Baltimore, I think, to me, did get I'll call it a favorable-ish schedule. There are still some things I would have liked to see go a little better for him. Again, the short weeks being one of them. But I like the fact that it's pretty even in terms of home, away, home, away, stuff like that. If I had to give a prediction, and I will get into this in much, much, much more detail, on the show tomorrow. I think for me, I'm going to go – I'll leave it vague. I'm going to say I'm going to go in between 11 and 13 wins for the Ravens this season. You're going to have to tune in tomorrow to hear my official record prediction, my early record prediction, my schedule predictions in terms of win-loss and everything like that. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But I think Baltimore has a good shot to be a good team this year, right? They're going to be a good team, but just in terms of record, the AFC is going to be so much different this season. There are going to be so many differences between last year and this year because no two teams are the same. No two seasons are the same when you're talking about year to year. But Baltimore is one of the best teams in the NFL. Again, the AFC Championship, I think, has kind of drained a lot of the excitement around the season so far, and hopefully that picks back up as we get closer and closer. But Baltimore, 10 playoff teams, I believe it is, 5 primetime games, 4 more in the 425, 430 slot. The NFL wants the Ravens front and center this year, and they're absolutely going to get it. I see Joe giving me some emojis in the chat, too. I appreciate you, Joe. I don't have them here for Locked On Ravens, but obviously on Ryan, we do have all the emojis over there. That's all I have for you here today on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. Really appreciate everybody tuning in tonight to get into this instant schedule breakdown. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more Ravens content, getting into my official early Ravens record prediction and schedule predictions game by game. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.